Hi, this is Jean Gunderson, and I'm going to be talking today about SIPPS implementation. I am a teacher at a school. I am a title teacher, and this is the second year that we've implemented SIPPS. Before that, as a title teacher, I did not have an intervention curriculum. I made up my own lessons using resources from a variety of sources. We had been trained on the core teaching reading source book, so we were using the Big Five in our classroom instruction and our interventions. But last year we adopted collaborative classroom with SIPPS as the intervention tool. And I've learned a lot about it. And I just want to share that information with my colleagues who may be getting started with SIPPS. The reason I'm talking about SIPPS is because that's the curriculum that we have. If we would have adopted VOAC, I would be talking about VOAC to help people out. If we would have adopted Open Court, I would be talking about Open Court. Same kind of thing. I just want to share information that I know. I also have a disclaimer that I do not work for the company. This is completely unauthorized. This is one teacher's viewpoint. I'm speaking only here on behalf of myself. And there's a place to click where you can go for official information from the company. That's their website. Those of you who have collaborative classroom products can also go through the learning portal to access much information about the programs that you use, including SIPPS. Last year, I earned my dyslexia certificate from the University of Florida while I was teaching SIPPS. And I also know how to teach without using any program at all because I have that learning and expertise, but I have found SIPPS to be a very efficient program for reading instruction. Again, for that, the SIPPS, or I should say again, for foundational skills. If you're not aware, SIPPS is for foundational skills, systematic instruction in phonological awareness, phonics, and sight words. So SIPPS is not working on solidifying the vocabulary and comprehension, which is, of course, the goal of reading. SIPPS is making sure that the students can read what's put in front of them so that later they can comprehend it. They still need that vocabulary and comprehension instruction through read alouds and other instruction in the classroom. So I do have a two-part series on the science of reading. They're each about 30 minutes long on YouTube. And in the first part, I explain the background behind it. And then in the second part, I give some practical recommendations for teachers. And then I have a very brief video here, 3-minute video about my SIPPS classroom and how I have materials organized. I will have this this Google Slides presentation underneath the YouTube video, and also look underneath the YouTube video for this PDF, because that's what I will be teaching from or showing you an example from during this video. One thing to mention, which I've mentioned before in other presentations, if you've heard me speak, is to be careful about the science of reading. The science of reading is a body of research that shows how kids best learn how to read, write, etc. We are sometimes struggling a little bit to translate the science into practice. So that's why some folks have talked about the science of teaching reading being something that's necessary to learn versus the science of reading movement. And the science of reading movement is like the Facebook groups, such as the one that I helped start, the South Dakota Science of Reading Facebook group. We have to be careful with some of the information on there because that's, anybody can post on there. So when we're talking about the science of reading, we are talking about the body of research that shows how students best learn how to read. And SIPPS has been around for decades. And before we started talking about the science of reading a lot, they were doing evidence-based instruction, again, in foundational skills. So I'm not sure what questions people would have. You can definitely post them under this video, and I'd be happy to help you out if I can. But I know that some things that might come up because they came up for us are these. Why are there so many sight words and how are they taught? So there are a lot of sight words, and I was kind of put off by that at first, but there's a lot of sight words because first of all, they want the kids to know those words. They come up a lot. They're often used sight words. They come up a lot in outside readings. And also they wanted their readings, their connected texts that they use to be readable. and and more authentic. So they don't want kids to have to always read about the cat on the mat with the rat, kind of a thing. So there is a very aggressive list of sight words. If you have teachers teaching collaborative classroom tier 1, it'll be a little bit easier because those words, some of them are repeated in the Being a Reader program. But that's why they have so many sight words. And what we found was helpful was to send home lists of sight words that we got. Somebody had just typed it up, and teachers paid like $2 for it. And just constantly review those sight words and send them home for parents to review with the students as well. The sight words are not taught during using the heart word method that many of you may be familiar with, where you put the hearts over the non-decodable parts of the words. Some teachers do use heart word instruction for the sight words in SIPPS. I have not done that. I think that it would slow down the instruction. So we just really drill the sight words and just move on. We use the read, spell method, which is said to promote orthographic mapping or automatic recognition of those words, which we'll go over in the lesson here. Why are there so many skills together? So for example, in the lessons in extension, there are suffixes added on right after the kids learn the silent E pattern. And the reasoning behind all of this is that SIPPS wants, the folks who made SIPPS want to teach the skills to mastery, because the kids who are using SIPPS, when they come back and they spiral back to a skill to review it, if they haven't necessarily mastered it, and then they haven't mastered the skills ahead of it, and it just becomes a big mess. So they want the kids to master each phonics skill before moving on to the next stories. And you'll see your materials will be extremely clear about when you should move on and when you shouldn't. But you'll see that they want you to move on when they've mastered the phonics skills. So we don't want to get caught up in those sight words, but we do want them to know as many as possible because they are in the connected text that comes with it. And then what about giving students breaks? We have found that our students can sit through quite a long lesson because they're doing so many different things. So we have often given them the break at the end of the lesson. And that has worked well for us. So stretch break in the classroom, if it's a short lesson. When I had 40-minute lessons, I did 35 minutes intense and then 5 minutes in the gym. And even the first graders could do that. If you have kids, of course, that need more breaks, then you would use your judgment to build those in. But it is difficult to break up a lesson. So I would say definitely find a good stopping point between activities in a lesson and have the break at that time every day. The cool thing about SIPPS being a scripted program, one of the cool things about it is that for those kids who have the slower processing, this reduces the cognitive load of wondering, what is the teacher going to ask next? What's going to happen next? It's always the same routine. Learning letter names is a program that comes with SIPPS beginning. You will need to supplement this program. It does not have enough instruction for each letter, in my opinion. So I use Jack Hartman videos. He has this letter videos that go over each letter, and he sings the same song each time, but that goes with the name of the letter, has kids write it in the air, and then talk about words that start with and end with that letter. You may want to provide some handwriting pages, sandpaper letters, those kinds of things, however you usually do it. Laying out the letters in a row. The SIPPS sends uppercase and lowercase. So for example, with one group, we just learned R and T. So I might lay it out uppercase R, lowercase r, and then T's. Read it R, R, T, T, and then have everybody read it. And then I have them mix it up and then see if I can read it, you know, that kind of a thing. And then I mix it up, see if they can read it, just that constant practice. So you will need to supplement with other ways that you've taught letters in the past while you're doing the learning letter names. You do not have to teach letter sounds. They'll be taught in SIPPS beginning. I know that the research says that we can teach sounds and letter names together. And then if you have to teach one, it's best to teach letter sounds because that's what kids use for emergent reading. However, this also works. The way that they do it in SIPPS is going to be the most efficient way. If you have this program, then you should do it the way that they instruct you to do it, because it's going to be the most efficient way to do it, since you own this program. So they need 21 letter names in order to start SIPPS beginning. So you can teach the uppercase and lowercase together, but make sure to access that RTI MTSS document in the learning portal and the appendices to that document, because it will give you information about what to do when students are needing some extra time with those skills. So for example, if students are needing extra time to master letter names, it's getting overwhelming for them, they'll instruct you to go back and do uppercase only, then go back and do it a second time, connecting the lowercase name to the uppercase name, and then they'll learn the sounds in beginning. And beginning really helps them to master those letter sounds. So it's certainly okay to teach the sounds as you teach the letter, but when you're looking for mastery, look for the mastery of the letter name, and as soon as they can get those, go into SIPPS beginning. SIPPS beginning is meant for kindergarten, for the second semester of kindergarten, and for first grade. So if kids can get through SIPPS beginning, they've gotten through the end of kindergarten for phonics. But I would say it's pretty aggressive. It has like trigraphs and things like that, digraphs and trigraphs. So I would say that they're, pretty a little bit into first grade when they get through that SIPPS beginning program. So if you have a kindergartner who finishes SIPPS beginning, they really might not need any more remediation acceleration. It's for, again, kindergarten and first grade. There's 55 lessons. There's various entry points. Make sure you use the screening tests to figure out where kids should be placed. The first 10 lessons just use sight words with a picture at the end of each sentence, and the students can work on one-to-one correspondence and sight words. I've seen a lot of criticism of this in the science of reading groups, but I think if you look at them, you'll see that it's really artfully done, because they'll say, like, if it's I can see the, it's a, I can see the, so your sight words and whatever it is, car, and then I can see two, and then be two trucks or something, two trucks, and then I can see, and then it wouldn't even have a modifier before it. So they're still having to follow with the one-to-one correspondence. It doesn't bother me that those first few lessons ask them to look at a picture at the end just for one word. But that's they get them started with using the sight words, and then they start to decode. I think it's about around lesson 11. Use the B lessons at your discretion. I did not need a lot of B lessons. There's A lessons and B lessons. So if you need to do another day with the same story, the same skills, it'll have B stuff to do. So you'll have the phonological awareness for the B day, the phonics, and so on. I didn't need a lot of that with the beginning. Kids progress through beginning pretty quickly. I did send home the sight words so that they could work on those at home, because we had to learn so many, especially the first year when they haven't had it the year before. We learned over 150 in first grade title during the first semester. So that was very impressive. I am going to demonstrate a little bit for SIPPS beginning lesson 40. There are sample videos in the learning portal and also on the collaborative classroom YouTube page. And then there's a lot that teachers did like during the pandemic and things like that also on the YouTube page, but you have to be a little bit careful, because sometimes the teachers didn't really know what they were going for when they did the video. So I would stick mainly with the ones that come right off of the collaborative classroom channel. So inside your resources, they have all sorts of videos that you can listen to that tell you how to do these skills and things like that. You can click on animations of videos, or they're right in the lessons as well. I'm going to click on lesson 40, and this has my papers. Now, last year, I just printed out these papers and used the papers. This year I have an iPad for the first time, so I'm able to use the Card Deck app, which my colleague had used last year, and she highly recommended I use it. And boy, does it make things much more efficient to not have to print out these papers and be writing on the board so much. So this is and I don't know if I mentioned on the first slide, there was the two-part science of reading video, but there was also a 3-minute tour of my SIPPS classroom, what it looks like and how I organize my materials. This is for phonological awareness. So first you would reread a story, and then in part two, phonological awareness, you would say rhyme with N. Mm, students say men. Rhyme with N. Pen. The students say rhyme with N. Students say pen. Men, hen, pen. Does pan rhyme with men, hen, pen? So anyway, then you have to talk about those phonograms, and that is difficult for a lot of the students. But at first, you have to get them into the routines, and so you're going to say rhyme with N, and then they're going to want to say rhyme with N, or whatever, repeat exactly what you repeated, what you've said. But you are supposed to give the prompts, and they are supposed to respond as a group without you responding. You are not supposed to add your voice to the group when they respond. There are times at the beginning, like for kindergartners, first graders, where I do that. And then sometimes when I have ELLs that are new to the country, then I oftentimes respond with them so that they can hear the model of the speaking. Then we have segmenting onsets and rhymes. So say nets, beginning sound, students say and then rhyme ets. I do not use the word rhyme, R-I-M-E. Especially having so many emergent bilingual students, because we just talked about different kind of rhymes. So then I just say beginning sound, rest of the word, but whatever cues you give them, just use the same cues each time. So in part three, we have phonics. We have no new sounds today. Otherwise, we would hold up the sound card and there would be a sentence that goes with it. So we are going to review the sounds, and this is all scripted out for you right in the manual. So I would say sound. Students say again, sound, again. And if you use the card deck app, this is all in there for you. Otherwise, for the things like the sounds and the sight words, and then when you get the challenge, the sight syllables, those are all in the flashcards in the boxes. Otherwise, it's much more efficient if you can use the card deck app on an iPad. Okay, then we are going to read entire words. And there's different scaffolds for this. So in lesson 40 of beginning, we are sounding it twice and then reading it. So I say sound, and again, and read, pan. And anything that we're doing, we're with sounding out things, we're trying to do connected phonation. So it's not it's and. That's a little tricky because that P is a stop sound, has a stop sound. So it's easier as we go, man, it's easier with those continuous consonants. But we are trying to get that connected phonation because that has been shown to help students be able to read the fastest rather than doing separate sounds like sk, id. You do it together, connected. Sk, id, blend, skid. And you see me moving my hand just automatically. It'll tell you how to move your hand across the words and stuff like that. And so, it takes a little bit to get used to, but it's really, I did not have any challenges, learning how to do these. There's a few things here and there where I have to go back still even at the beginning of year 2 and remember some of the correction procedures and stuff like that. But it just moves so quickly, and it's just such an efficient program. Sight words, then you'll introduce, and they have a sentence for that, and then you'll hold up the card or use the card deck app, and you will do a read, spell, read for the introduction of the sight word. So read from, they say, and then you say spell, and the students spell it, F-R-O-M. Read from, spell, F-R-O-M. Read from, read, spell, read. When we review the sight words, we read, spell, read. And they do call them sight words, not high frequency words. So we just stick with that naming, even though sight words has a lot of different definitions now. And we sometimes talk about sight words as being any words that you can recognize. For example, in this, I can recognize Mexico, but that wouldn't be taught as a sight word. But they use the word sight words instead of high frequency words. So that is the naming of that we go with as well. So you've taught your sight words, you've reviewed your sight words. If you use the app, they're right in the app for you, and you can add or delete. And in the app, if they get it right, you swipe up. The kids mainly have it, swipe up, you go on to the next sight word. If they don't get it right, swipe down and it'll add that sight word to the end of that review for that day. Then they're going to read a story. Now, people display these different ways. This beginning one is lessons are the only ones that have these huge posters. I just hold it. I just look from the side and I have them read it. Read a, sound bug, read bug, sound in, read in, read a, sound read a bug in a rug. So anyway, I just hold it and then I open it up for the end and then I can just toss it aside instead of having to have, something that it's standing on that kids could trip over. But when I've seen lessons presented, they have that hanging up somewhere. They also have written out the words and they have those written out, those up like on a board for kids to look at. I have found that even in my group of 7 students, that are sitting at a rectangle table, that the iPad, the words are big enough on there for them to be able to see. Not for the story. They don't have the story on there, but I mean, as far as presenting the words. And then they have the poster and then later they'll read it in the little blue books and then they can read it on a paper as well. So I would say for the story, I'd say today we'll read about a woman who drives a red pickup truck. So remember, when it starts when it's a high frequency word, they just read it. When it's not a high frequency word, they sound it out. So I'm going to say read, sound, read, sound, read, like all that sound, read, and they're going to sound it and read it. So that takes a little bit. You have to give them some guidance on that. The other thing you need to give them guidance on is like when we're back on these words here that are like this. Well, this one, it's a little bit easier when you're blending them. And read, pan, because you're doing it right after you're blending it. But when you do start to do it without having them blend it, you're supposed to blend it twice, by the way, and say it for this lesson. But my kids can do it after one. So whatever scaffolds they don't need, just drop. When you get to extension or when you get to these later beginning lessons, they say, read, and then they read it. And then you pause while they read it to themselves. So you have to train them not to blurt out when they have it in their heads. Read, and then they say it. Okay, so now we're reading my red truck. So I'd say read my, sound red, read red, sound to read truck, read my red truck. And then you speak back to the beginning of the sentence, or in this case, the title. Read here I, sound am, read am, sound in, read in my, sound ig, read big, sound ed, read red, sound to read truck, read here I am in my big red truck, and so on. Okay, do not skip the sounding out and the reading. By the way, it's not that hard. Every once in a while you'll say read instead of sound or something like that, like I just did, but it starts to get more and more efficient. This is a great way for them to be able to sound out the words, read the words, and go back and read the sentence as they're getting ready to read those little blue books. So after you read a story, then you have guided spelling and then fluency practice. And you can see there's a mastery test here at the end of lesson 40, which I'll show you how to do later. This right here is they do have these, and then they have for kids who need a little bit of extra OT work or anything like that, they have where you can trace and write, and they have some multisensory stuff. You can use it as multisensory as well. But I have not used that. I just use this sheet and I connect it back to back with this sheet. So they do their guided spelling on here, and it tells you explicitly how to say the words, what to say for each word and each sentence. And then on the back of it is this, and then we usually read that again, or they go with their blue books and read the little blue books, which stay in the classroom. This gets sent home. The spelling with on the other side, the story. I put that on white paper. I also make a blue copy of the story. Blue is just a random color. It doesn't stand for beginning because I make my extension stories that color too. So it's not, oh, you're on beginning and you're on extension. So I just pick a different color other than the one I'm sending home, which in my case is blue. And I have them put them in a SIPPS folder in their classroom so that they have the story to read at home and in the classroom. And that's going to help them be more successful is working on repeated reads for fluency. So that's how you would go through SIPPS lesson 40. SIPPS extension is the next level after beginning. SIPPS extension has 15 review lessons and 40 lessons. Now remember, beginning is for kindergarten and first grade only. SIPPS extension is an at-level program for first grade, and it provides remediation acceleration for students in second and third grade. There's various entry points. Again, you use the screener, and the screening tests, which can be found in the learning portal or in the appendices at the back of your book. By the way, make sure you read the RTI MTSS document from the learning portal, and make sure you read all your book's appendices and the introduction so you understand what you're doing and why. So the 15 review lessons are intended to be used for grades 2 to 3 students instead of beginning. So you'll see it on your mastery test. On your, screening test. Don't use the mastery test as a screener and vice versa. It'll say, if the student's in grade 1, put the student in SIPPS beginning lesson 41 or something like that. If the student's in grades 2 to 3, put the student in or try extension review lesson 1. So it'll tell you where to place the student. So the 15 review lessons are intended for grades 2 to 3 students who place into like a beginning level. But first of all, sometimes grades 2 to 3 students have to go back to beginning. So I used beginning, for example, with students who were in second grade, who were from out of country. They had just come in and didn't have a lot of experience with reading in home language or in English. So I have used beginning past first grade. And also we use the review lessons as a transition from beginning to extension. So let's say you have first graders and they finish beginning. They're supposed to now move to extension lesson 1. They are not supposed to do the extension review lessons. Those was for those older students who tested in beginning, but we're putting them in those extension review lessons instead. However, my colleagues and I have found that it is much more beneficial to use the extension review lessons for everybody. Unless you have kids that are just like, zooming through, but most of our kids need that extra practice. And to jump from beginning lesson 55 to extension lesson 1 is a huge jump in the amount of text. So we have gone ahead and used those extension review lessons for everybody moving from the end of beginning to the beginning of extension. Extension comes with a reader that is, one purple book instead of all those little blue readers that are for the younger kids. We have found kids getting stuck in the first half of extension. This is something that we're still working on. For beginning, I often use just the A lessons. I didn't need the B lessons, but for extension, I often use the A and B lessons, and often backed up a lot more than in beginning. Extension gets pretty difficult pretty quickly. Like I was talking about before, teaching the CVCE rule, which is already pretty complicated, but then adding suffixes to it right away. For extension, I also sent home the sight words, and we also read down the list in class. Extension comes with the reader, but the reader is only through lesson 23. SIPPS in that lesson, and then in the appendix, one of the appendices at the end of the teacher book, lists recommendations for reading during lessons 24 to 40. And I had some title money, and I was able to get some of these books from this series. So I'm very excited about that. So we just got these in. Katie Wu series, Henry and Mudge series, Rappy and Rosie series, King and Kayla series, and the Pedro series. Pedro and Katie Wu go together, same author, they're friends. And I have a picture here on the right, and it's a little confusing because I see on the right it says Katie Wu's name, but it's actually from a Pedro book. And what I was trying to show there is that the Pedro books are a little bit easier than, for example, the one on the left, which is the King and Kayla book. So you're probably going to want to look at these ahead of time and figure out where your students can best be placed. I did present these to my students last week, and some of these, I wish I would have just given them the Pedro ones at first, because some of these, like the King and Kayla, were a bit too challenging, and we want them to experience a lot of success when they're first moving from that extension reader to the chapter books. A series that I'm familiar with, by the way, you can get a whole library of books from the Collaborative Classroom site. I bought these off of Amazon Business, but you can get them from the Collaborative Classroom site, ones that they recommend for readers at certain stages. This book, this series, the Hey Jack series, I happen to know from past experience is even more of an immersion chapter book. This can be used as even a smoother transition from the SIPPS extension reader to chapter books. So I just bought some of these Hey Jack ones. So we're going to go from the SIPPS extension reader to the Hey Jack, to the Pedro, then to the more the one that has more words on the page, like the King and Kayla. Another recommendation that I have, what I've used in the past, are the Core Knowledge Language Arts free readers, CKLA, and make sure you click on the skills strand, and that, because those are the decodable readers, and those come at various grade levels, and they are very knowledge based. They have a lot of information. A lot of them are not juvenile, even at the first grade level. I'd really check out those first grade ones, even for some of those older readers, and then take off the front and the back. It says that they're first grade, or cover that part up. There's a lot of really great stuff, and they're systematic, and they're free just for the cost of paper. So I wanted to show you a little bit about SIPPS lesson 40. So what I did is I took lesson 40 from SIPPS, extension lesson 40. I took lesson 40 from each of 3 SIPPS programs, and I wanted to show you those lessons. So lesson 40, which is the purple one. Start again with some phonological awareness. Say mask, mask, drop, ma, and so on. Then reviewing, there's no new spelling, so we would review sounds. So say they had TCH, sound, sh, again, sh. Reading a mixed list. This is where you have to be careful, because you're not having them sound it out orally. They're sounding it out in their heads. So you're not saying sound, read, or sound, read. You're just pointing to it and saying read. And if it's on the app, it'll just be one word at a time. Otherwise, you have these lists where you're just pointing down the list, which is what I did last year before I had an iPad, or you have them written large on the board or someplace else. Okay, so you put your finger in front of the first word, give them some time. You have to train them that that's what they're doing, is reading in their head. Read, circus. Read, scratch. No blurting. And they do fine. My first graders do fine with not blurting out as well. There are corrections. I had to look up the silent E correction at the beginning of this year, because it is a lot, especially if you only teach SIPPS like one lesson a day. It'll take a little bit longer to learn, but I taught 8 to 10 lessons a day last year, so I guess I learned it pretty quickly. So the silent E one is something like this. They say, let's say instead of grade, they say grad, and then you say, is there an E at the end? Yes. Sound, you're pointing to that first A, because then it's silent E, it makes the A say the same. So A, sound A, read, grade. Here it says in lesson 40, the CECICY correction. So say they say Kirkus. Probably not going to, because I recognize that word, but if they have a different one where they say a hard one. So Kirkus, is there an E, I, or Y after the C? And I'm pointing to the I underneath it. Yes. Sound, read, circus. So they just have to say yes, as if there's an EI or Y, and then the sound would be soft because there's an EI or Y after it, and then the word. And then in lesson 40 of extension, they have them reading some 2-syllable words that are decodable to them based on the vowel patterns that they've read. And it gives us instructions as teachers that if we need to use the scaffolds from lessons 34 to 39, go ahead and do that. Otherwise, just tell them today you will read these words on your own. First, I will point to the word. You will silently read the syllables in the word. When I say read, you will read the word out loud, which is the same procedure as the reading a mixed list, which we did before this. So that should be pretty easy for them. So point, say read, they read. Let them silently read the next one. They read, they read. Then we have the sight words are the same procedure as the beginning. They're going to give you some sentences, then they're going to present the word heart. You'll and then there's heart and enough are in here. You'll read, spell, read initially, and then you'll review some sight words with read, spell, read. Oftentimes they know the sight words, especially like the group that I backed up this year quite a bit. They know the sight words, so then I'll just say read, instead of read, spell, read. Or we'll read down the list without read, spell, read. Guided spelling, there is a page like this, and it has 4 decodable words, and then words 5 and 6 are in the sight word dictionary. By the way, there's words that are in the sight word dictionary for beginning as well. There's 2 different beginning sight word dictionaries. Make sure to use the right one. They're in the back of the SIPPS book in the appendix. And then there's also a sight word dictionary for extension. And what I've done, because the extension stories, I do the same thing. I send home a story on white paper, and I send to the classroom a story on blue paper, but the extension stories are 2-sided. So there's no room to put the guided spelling sheet. So what I do is I just have them write the name on here, and then I just make a whole packet of these. Usually I take, and I have the originals here in my closet where I write number 1 with a Sharpie, number 2, so that the number is already there for them and they just have to find it. We put a little sticky note as our bookmark. In this case, I had backed this group up quite a bit this year, and I did not want them to know how far we had backed up, so we don't have numbers on them. I also use a booklet like this for challenge, even though we only use 5 words for challenge. I find it helpful to have the lines. Even though the kids are older, I had given them blank papers last year. I think lined paper would be fine, but I had given them blank paper last year, and I had words all over the place. So I just give them a booklet of lined paper, just like I do with the extension students, and then it stays in the classroom, and then when they fill one up, then that goes home with them. I do also have little cards that I have them fill out after they've done certain mastery or after we've worked hard for a few weeks. We fill out an index card, and it has their name, and it has stickers, and they can color it and things like that. I also do for the older kids a glow stick after every 10 lessons. Okay, 10 lessons. Lesson 40 is done. Here's your glow stick. Just kind of keep them excited about pushing through, especially in challenge where we have 75 lessons. All right, but whatever works for you. So then we have plus, and plus I have not taught, but my colleagues have taught it. So I'm sure they'd be happy to answer any questions. But everything that I've asked them, I'm like, well, is that like extension? Is that like extension? Yeah, it's very similar to extension. However, extension is for grades 1 through 3, and plus is for grades 4 through 12. The reader that comes with plus, Dreams on Wheels and Other Stories, is written with smaller print, and it has content that's appropriate for older emergent readers. It looks like the kind of reader you might get in high school or middle school, but it does have the content, the level that's the same as extension, which is kindergarten to first grade level. A lot of folks have talked about SIPPS Plus being a game changer, because you have those older emergent readers and you are not giving them, more juvenile literature. You're giving them more high interest, more mature type of readers. Again, various entry points use the screening test. Again, SIPPS Plus is like SIPPS extension, but it's for the older emergent. SIPPS Challenge is different. SIPPS Beginning, Extension, and Plus are set up similarly as far as the lesson. SIPPS Challenge is for polysyllabic word reading. You are not going to you're still going to give the test to kids to see if they need plus, like the older kids, say 4 to 12, to see if they need plus or if they test into challenge. If they test into challenge, you start at lesson 1 and you end at lesson 75. You teach all 75 lessons. And unlike the other levels where they're learning all of the phonics patterns, this is taught for exposure. The other lessons are taught for mastery. But you can teach this over and over again. So you can teach it so for example, last year was my first year with SIPPS, so I taught it in 3rd grade, and now I'm going to teach it in 4th grade, and I think we'll be good at that. But if they needed it again in 5th, they could have it. So 3 levels of words. There's this now. A and B doesn't mean days of lessons, like A lesson on day 1 and a B lesson on day 2. Now they're levels of words that are supposed to match up with the kids' listening comprehension, with words that are in their listening vocabulary. So SIPPS Challenge, if used in 2nd grade, would be an at-level program, beginning of 3rd grade as well. The A level words are for 2nd graders working on polysyllabic word reading. The B level words are for 3rd graders, and the C level words are for 4th through 12th graders. You can adjust that as needed based on where your kids' listening vocabulary is. SIPPS Challenge does not come with a student reader. Students read their own books. They should be coming in with their chapter books, and they apply the polysyllabic word decoding strategies to what they are reading. So you can sit with a little marker board, listen to somebody read. If you notice that she makes a mistake, reading the word polysyllabic, write it out, and then have her read it by syllables. So that's what you can do during the fluency practice during SIPPS Challenge. So let's take a look at SIPPS Challenge stuff in the learning portal. So I'm in the resources tab for all of this stuff. Lesson 40. And SIPPS now this year has, and I'm clicking on 40A, you got to be careful when you're printing these out that you get the right words. So now I'm teaching 2nd graders if I am on A, but whoops, I wanted to teach 3rd graders, and I had decided, yes, the 3rd grade words would be best for them. So I click on there. But yeah, you have to be careful when you're if you're printing these out, that you print out the right ones. So you're going to start with some spelling sound relationships, sound again, then reading a mixed list, same thing, you point, read, you're not sounding out. At the beginning of SIPPS Challenge, they have something called syllabic transformations. We do not teach the 6 syllable types anymore. I taught that for all the way until last year when I got SIPPS. And Dr. Devin Kearns has talked about this. Apparently Dr. John Scheffelbein, who wrote SIPPS, knew this a long time ago, which is that the most efficient way to teach multi-syllable word reading is to have simple rules and massive amounts of practice. So we do not go through, well, this is a consonant LE syllable, and this is a vowel team syllable, and this, that, and the other thing. We teach open and closed, which are what most of the syllable types are in words. So one vowel at the end is long, one vowel not at the end is short. They do not teach that as open and closed syllables, but that's what it is. So that we teach as a generalization because it's not a rule. It does not always occur. SIPPS Challenge, one of the main things that they teach in here is the schwa. Starting at lesson 7, they are teaching kids how an unstressed syllable in a multisyllabic word is often schwad, type of a sound. It's an oversimplification of it. If anybody has like a linguistics degree, they're going to say, well, actually, but it's good enough for us. At the beginning of SIPPS, they have syllabic transformations. So I'll write on the board or it'll come up on the app, po. I'll say read, po, and then add an M, read, pom, read, get rid of the P, So basically one vowel at the end is long, one vowel not at the end is short, teaching them to read open and closed syllables. Then after we've had a lot of practice, they switch into morphemic transformations. So we're going to say read, admire, and I'm going to put the ing in there, erase the e, point to the suffix, read-ing, read, admiring. The hand signals are very easy. You're basically pointing to things. I know there's one in the beginning that I haven't mastered yet, and that has to do with if there's a continuous sound, you hold your finger under it, but if it's not continuous, you swipe up, something like that. I don't always have that, but it's pretty intuitive for the hand movements. Sight syllables you're going to learn, they're going to learn like the LE, which is often difficult for kids. You know, the BLE and the PLE and the GLE, they often want to say blay or blee instead of bull, that LE, you're going to learn the ER, those kinds of things. Reading by syllables. Now they're going to read, you're going to write CEN, or it'll be on the app, read sen, because it's followed by an E. Now, if they said Ken, you would say, is there an EI or what? You would go through the correction procedure. And then they'll read the second one, trow. And then if it is irregularly cites sound spelling sound correspondence, then you're supposed to say try for the real word. Otherwise, if it's regular, you're supposed to say read. But I always say read because I can't go back and forth like that. And then reading entire words, they're going to have these words, and then you're supposed to figure out how to divide them. So you'll say, is there an irregular sight syllable at the end? If not, then, or even if there is, how many consonants between the two vowels? 2, divide where? Between the two consonants. And if it's one consonant between the two vowels, divide where? First try before, then try after. They'll teach that skill by skill as you go along through the program, because remember, we're already at lesson 40 of 75. In guided spelling, they are going to have, they don't give a paper for guided spelling. I use the same one as extension. They're going to have 5 polysyllabic words to write. So that's how a SIPPS challenge lesson goes. And now I want to show you a little bit about the learning portal. If you go into the learning portal, they will have some announcements that you can click on. They will also have where you can ask a question, or the support center, I'm sorry, where you can look up questions that have been asked or that they think you should know or might ask. Learning portal tutorials, so you can go through and learn where things are. And then on the bottom right, they have a support. That is a live chat. So you can ask anything in real time. The resources, that's where I was pulling the papers from. They also have, like if you use the app, you don't need all those extra resources. So you could go to your SIPPS thing that you use, and then we have the stories are all right in here in beginning general resources. So you could print out the stories, you can print out the spelling page, or you can print it out from the appendix. They just have a ton of stuff in here. There is a SIPPS letter that goes home in other resources and beginning general resources. Also a learning letter names, family letter. Not sure where that is right now, but it's in there. There's a learning letters name, family letter, and then there's a SIPPS family letter in English and Spanish. And you can click on sight words index and all sorts of stuff. It's a lot of the stuff that's in the appendices, but then there's more like the stories. And so that's what the resources are. And then professional learning is just like a ton of stuff that you can use. Click on teacher learning system. It'll tell you what kinds of things you should go through in this portal. There's just tons of stuff in here. Plus they also have their website that I listed in my first slide or my second slide. Implementation resources, how to get started with all that. All of these tabs have their own tour, so you know how to use them. But what I'm going to show you are 2 apps, the 2 apps that I use, the Card Deck app and ClassView Pro. The Card Deck app is what we use on our iPads to present the lessons. So first we enter the students, which I'll show you later. And then we can click on our class. that we're presenting our lesson to. Put the iPad on the table, and we can present the lesson to them. So I set this up for lesson 40, and then I did it. And now I'm going back and redoing lesson 40. Well, I wouldn't redo 40A, I would do 40B. So why don't I just go through that then? Let's say they needed to do 40B because they just did 40A and they needed additional practice with that. Otherwise, I could go on to lesson 41. And it's going to have the phonological awareness is going to be kind of like what you heard me say, but it's going to be different words because now I'm using the B words from the very same lesson. So you do the phonological awareness, and then it'll have the spelling sound correspondence. It doesn't have any here because I haven't really taught any lessons. Then it'll have the word list, okay, and then the sound and read, you would say, and then so on, and the sight words, and then the guided spelling, and then you can write it right on here on your iPad. You say, as you are prompted in the teacher manual, read and spell whatever the word it is. They'll read it off their paper, they'll spell it out loud, you write it, and then you flip it around so they can check it. So that's what you use to present the lesson. Again, that's called the card deck app. You use that to present a SIPPS lesson. But first you need to make your classes and put them into groups. If you are being a reader, your administrator can send class lists, like import them and then get them to each classroom teacher. And then the classroom teacher can share students with, for example, the special ed teacher, ELL teacher, title teacher, with whoever's going to do SIPPS. Maybe you do a walk to read and it's going to be a different teacher. The classroom teacher should be able to share from there. For those who do not have being a reader and you just use SIPPS without the whole collaborative classroom tier 1 instruction, then you can just enter your students yourself. It's very easy to do. And then there's also support for that. So you would click on students and then it's add new student, put them in a class, put them in a group. And then from there, you can also assess the student. So I'm going to assess this person, fake student. So I click on fake student's name. If you don't click on fake student's name, okay, click on SIPPS. And now I want to give this person a mastery test. This came up for me and I thought, oh no, why are there no assessments available? But really you have to click on fake student's name. You click on and you want to give the mastery test. And when you're giving the mastery test, it simply presents it for you. The student will be reading off of the papers that you can find either in the portal or more easily probably in the appendix at the back of the SIPPS book. The students are reading off of those cards. You're supposed to cut them off and make them into, like, I think cardstock cards. I just have a packet of the whole thing on paper and I just have them read down whatever ones I need them to read. So let's say they have this correct, just correct, correct, incorrect, correct, and so on. And then at the end, you will click done and it'll save their progress. The one drawback is that it doesn't have, if you do paper and pencil test, where you're grading on paper, you can write what they said. So you can see if they're having a lot of like long vowel versus short vowel errors or what their errors are. Here it's, it has a place for that, but it's too hard. It goes too fast. It's too hard to go down there and enter it in my opinion. So you can also do a paper and pencil test, grade it on paper and then put it into ClassView Pro and keep track of things like that. Or you can do what I did all last year, since I didn't use any of the apps, and grade it on paper and then just make an Excel document showing student progress. And then I would mark them as green, yellow, red. And then if you have a bunch of yellows and reds, you probably need to back up and repeat some lessons. So those are a couple of the tools that you can use there in the learning portal. ClassView Pro for entering students and assessing individual students. And I just do this right off of my computer. I don't try to mess around with the iPad. The student is reading off of a paper. I'm clicking on my computer what he or she has right and wrong. And the card deck app is used to present the lessons to the students. So again, this is just me telling you how to use this in case you are going to be using the SIPPS program, or in case you're interested in how it works because you're considering various reading intervention programs. I cannot recommend SIPPS over other intervention programs that are aligned with the science of reading because I have not used those programs. I would love to have a cohort where we start the kindergartners on VOAC and move them through. You know, we have these first graders on collaborative classroom on SIPPS and move them through. It's just not reasonable for what we have going on. So I hope somebody would, I think it would be fun if somebody would do that kind of research at a school. But I will say that SIPPS works very well. My colleagues and I are happy with the progress that we've seen from students. We are happy with the ease of teaching and organizing the materials and how much time it gives us to focus on those students and their needs rather than focusing on pulling resources from all directions to make 8 to 10 lessons a day, which is what we were doing before we had a scripted curriculum. It is an efficient program for reading intervention for foundational skills. If you have any questions, you can contact me at this email address. I always click on the wrong thing here. View slideshow. Here you go. Oh, that's not even right. It's jean.gunderson@k12.sd.us. Somehow the dot did not show up. Thank you very much for your time, and be in touch if you have any questions.